Okay, for those of you that don't know me, and there's a number of people in the room that I don't know, I recognize a lot of faces in here, but not all of them. My name is Dr. Mike Searcy. I teach in the communication department and spend a lot of time doing workshops and consulting work in the areas of communication, in the areas of interpersonal communication, in the areas of organizational communication, intercultural consulting, and the various other aspects of things that are important along these lines. But one of the more important things that I think we neglect is communication with ourselves. Believe it or not, how we communicate with ourselves, or intrapersonal communication, has a direct bearing on how we perceive the world and how we actually are able to interact with the world. In some cases, we refer to this as social construction. Believe it or not, our entire economy is built on social construction. After all, who would have guessed that pieces of paper with green ink on them would be valuable? And in fact, are they valuable in and of themselves? No, they're pretty pieces of paper with funky portraits on it, right? And yet somehow we have determined that those pieces of paper with Ben Franklin's face on it is more valuable than those pieces of paper with George Washington's face on it. Why is that? It is because somehow we've socially constructed the idea that the number 100 is greater than the number 1. When we talk about language, whether it's with ourselves or with anyone else, we talk about the idea, and some of my students are already familiar with this, we talk about the idea that language is symbolic and symbols have three major characteristics. The first one being that that symbols are arbitrary, which means somehow we've decided. And because we've decided certain things, and everyone has somehow agreed to this decision, you know, these pieces of green paper shuffling around between hand and hand means something to our hunting and gathering instincts and acquisition instincts. It's true because we've decided. So today we're going to talk about power images and positive personal climates. All of these things have to do with how we see ourselves and indeed how we actually construct and perceive the world. So if you open up your handouts that I've got here, let's look at page 2. Look at page 2. Images and climates begin in thoughts. Mahatma Gandhi said that your beliefs become your thoughts. Your beliefs become your thoughts. Your thoughts become your words. Your words become your actions, and your actions become your habits. Your habits become your values, and your values become your destiny. It takes 30 days to change a habit, minimum, if you're actually doing something on a very regular basis. And the reason for that is primarily because you have to constantly be thinking about it and constantly be doing it. So when we look at trying to figure out our habits, we need to actually go back and look at our thoughts. Because what we think about is incredibly important to how we shape our own world. So if you look at that picture at the bottom of that page, you're looking at a small cat looking into the mirror. What does that cat see? A lion. That cat is seeing itself as a large, ferocious, powerful lion. Do you suppose that if I see myself as somebody who is capable and confident and powerful, that I will actually act like that? Yeah. You suppose that cat is? How many of us know a cat who we're just sure believes it's the ruler of the house or the domain, and it acts like it? And here's the interesting part. You as the owner respond as if it were so. The cat is socially constructed, and you've agreed to its social construction. And you respond accordingly. Now, if the cat actually saw itself as a scared little mouse and always hid everywhere, how would you respond to it? with kid gloves, right? And you'd be very careful. You would be very careful with how you handle it. What we project has a tendency to come back to us. So let's look at page 3. Pull out a pencil, you're going to need one. Let's look at page 3. How did we develop the images that we have of ourselves today? Now I want you to think about this for a moment. And think about this in terms of I am, or I can do, or I can be. How do these people identify you? Look at that first one and just write in, mother. My mother. If your mother was significant to your life as you were growing up, what is it your mother, how is it your mother defined you? Based on your relationship with your mother, what are you able to do? What are you able to be? Who are you? Who are you? Take a quick note. And sometimes these are very, very positive. If we had a really secure and positive relationship with our mothers, the result here might be you might not be able to stop writing. The reverse can sometimes also be true as well. How about that second one, my father? What does your father teach you? How does your father define you? That next one, my siblings, my brothers and sisters. The people we probably interacted with the most growing up. Imaginary or otherwise. The next one, write in teacher or teachers. We've had some pretty significant, perhaps for the good, perhaps for the ill, but we've had some pretty significant teachers in our lives. And as we were growing up, what did they teach us about who we are? About what we can do, what we can be? I had a teacher once who actually taught mathematics and used to walk into the class of we fifth graders at the time and start every class with, I know you're not going to be able to do this, but let's get started. There's an awful lot of my former classmates who believe today they cannot do math. And when you hear that drummed into your head every day, that can become quite compelling. So my teachers. How about my friends? How about my friends? One of our friends taught us as we were growing up, where do we fit in that clique? Where do we fit in that group? Were we the intelligent one? Were we the jock? Were we the one who was always categorized as being 2 steps behind? And finally, put a question mark in the next blank. And right next to it, write down generalized other. You know, we're talking about social construction here. What do you think society thinks? What has society taught you that you're capable of doing, of being? What does society taught you? Think about that. What has your association with your television taught you? What has your association with your church taught you? What has your association with jokes? You know, one of the ways that we learn about the attitude of society and the generalized other is to listen to what is considered humorous. I grew up on the south side of Chicago. I'm quite Polish in ethnicity. Chicago is the second largest city in the world with the highest concentration of Polish people outside of Warsaw, Poland. And yet, how many times growing up did I have to endure those Polish jokes? What does society tell us about who we are? I watch television and I happen to be middle class. And I watch television shows like the Drew Carey Show, the Roseanne Show. People who are arguably middle class. What has society taught us by watching our relationship with our TV? It's okay to be in distress. It's okay to have lots of problems. It's okay to create lots of problems because you realize, of course, it's okay because you're going to actually solve all those problems within the next 30 minutes with 3 commercial breaks. That happens, right? The point I'm making is whether it's from the pulpit, and our pastors, ministers, deacons, priests, etc., are telling us this is how society acts, etc., and this is how we see you, or this is how we pick this up from TV. This is how we pick this up from jokes and humor and cultural stories and things like this. What does the generalized other tell us about who we are? And what did we really come away with understanding that? All right. You've thought about this now. You've thought about who you are based on what you've learned from other people. I want you to look back over that list, whether you wrote it down or whether you're just pondering it. Are these truths? Or are these beliefs? Think about that. Are they truths or are they beliefs? Beliefs are something that we have heard and or repeated so many times that we believe they must be true. Like I just said, that 5th grade math teacher that I had used to walk into the classroom every day and start off the class with, and I really think this math teacher didn't care much about themselves, but start off the class with, okay, you're not all going to get this, but let's get started anyway. And the people who were in that class today, who do not have any confidence in their ability to do math, and believe they can't do math. Is that a belief or a truth? It's a belief. It's a belief. They've heard it so many times, and then after the class, they said it so many times and repeated it perhaps to themselves, that they've convinced themselves it's absolutely true that they cannot do math. So, go back over that list. Think hard about what you wrote. Are they beliefs? Are they truths? Now, I'm not trying to step on your religious beliefs by any means, and all of that aside, how do we change beliefs? Beliefs about ourselves. Any ideas? Start rethinking what you are. Okay? Start looking in the mirror and see that lion, right? Okay. 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 So start reframing your perspective. Great. Should be writing that in the box. Reframing your perspective. Because that's exactly what we're going to talk about on page 4. Language defines and language directs. You know, there were a couple of linguists who are quite famous, or have been quite famous in the early 1900s, Edward Sapir and Benjamin Whorf. And we talk about the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis today as a concept that linguistics, rhetoric, what we say and how we say it, especially to ourselves, frames our entire reality. I'm going right back to that whole concept of social construction again. Let's look at page 4. Since the early 1900s, Edward Sapir first identified the concept that language defines the way a person thinks and consequently behaves. Language and thoughts, and consequently the whole communication process, are intertwined. And as such, people are constrained or liberated by the power of their vocabulary, the power of their communicative skill, and the power of their thinking. Benjamin Whorf, one of Sapir's students, picked up the idea of linguistic determinism and revolutionized the way we perceive language. He pioneered the idea that language is the very essence of who we are. It is the tool we use to shape ideas, and as such, with the various languages and ways of thinking, we see the various worldviews in existence throughout the world created and shaped as well. So what is social construction? Creating and shaping the world around us through language. Think about this. Vocabulary. You know, it's often cited by various communication, English and linguistics faculty that the Eskimos in Alaska and other places have many words and terms for snow. For snow. When in fact, what does that have anything to do with anything? The number of words to describe the various kinds of snow. All right, let's assume for a moment that that's true, that they've got many words for snow. Why would that be? We have maybe 4 words, right? If I'm going to use words to describe the various kinds of snow, I might use words like slush, wet, dry. If I'm the kind of person that likes to ski, I might use the word powder. We're not going to get that far beyond that. Maybe 1 or 2 more if we really start thinking really hard. But why is that? Because here, whether you're down here in Kentucky or up where I'm from in Chicago, we start looking at snow as nuisance, as a problem. So the word snow is pretty much a big cat classification. Unless I'm a sports person who likes going out in the snow, I'm going to look at it and say, well, you know, what am I going to have to deal with on my way to work? Now, the Eskimos, on the other hand, would require more, especially through the ages, through their history, would require more terms for snow, because depending upon the kind of snow, we know that that kind of snow is going to get you lost if you go tracking. You know, if you go hiking, you go looking for food, you go looking for whatever, that's the kind of snow that's going to cover up quickly behind you, potentially get you lost. That's the kind of snow, you come up with another one, that's the kind of snow that's actually going to cause even greater problems for your hunting and gathering with respect to food. That's the kind of snow that is perfect for building igloos. That's the kind of snow, and we can go on because snow is very vital, and the understanding of snow and the concepts of snow is very vital to the life of an Eskimo. So how they would relate to snow has a lot to do with how they've actually constructed their world. And the various different gradations of snow could mean something very special to how they live their life. Does it mean anything to us? No. It's not necessarily useful information. However, when we start looking at this, we start looking at it with the idea that, now if I understood more about the different classifications of snow as the Eskimos would understand it, do I now have greater insight into the world of the Eskimo? You bet I would. And I'm using this as a very simple example, but to increase your vocabulary, to learn another language can expand your whole perception of reality in ways that you can't even possibly think of right now. When we start looking at even simple things like, how do we relate to snow? Who understands anything about elephants, right? We often say the elephant's that large, huge, the largest land mammal on the planet, and we talk about elephants being smart. In fact, we say an elephant never what? Forgets. The elephant never forgets. And it also shows us that, we have lots of examples where, in fact, elephants have really long memories. Really long memories. We've seen this proven in various stages and stories all the time. And yet, has anyone here ever heard about how they train elephants in circuses? Not with peanuts, no. What's that?
Start when they're very young.
They start when they're very young, absolutely. And in fact, here's the interesting thing. It's what they do when they start when they're very young, and the fact that they have long memories is what we use, you might say, against them. Because what we might do is they actually put big stakes into the ground, and they put a rope on the stake and another rope on one of the legs of the elephant. It's not a rope that the elephant can break at the time that they're very young. And yet, that elephant realizes very early on, of course, that its range of motion is just the radius of that rope and that stake. So the whole length, the whole diameter of that circle that's created is about as far as they can go. They learn that very young. By the time those elephants start training in the actual circus and do the various tricks that they do, they actually commit feats of strength that are well beyond the strength of that rope. But because they couldn't break that rope when they were very young, by the time they get older, they stop trying. When they stop trying, is there any need to change the strength of the rope and make it a chain? Not really. Now, some will, of course. Some circuses will, but that's not always the case. Because, in fact, the elephant has been trained mentally to think, I'm constrained because I've never been able to break this rope before. What in the world makes me think I can break it now? What does that tell us about ourselves?
We have ropes in our own lives that are constraining us.
Excellent. We do have ropes in our own lives that have indeed constrained us. And when we talk about actually creating those images, those positive communication climates, and those powerful images that we have of ourselves, are we actually creating a very powerful constraint? And sometimes we are. We don't look at ourselves like that cat seeing the lion in the mirror. We look at ourselves like that cat seeing a mouse. So you might look at this and say, fill in the next box, right? How have I been shaped? How have I shaped my personal climate to believe that I am confined and unable to break free of my constraints? How have I done this? You know, the culture from where we're from, we're often told, well, people from your area, and then fill in whichever stereotype you want to fill in today. You're all, well, have we heard this? And if we've heard this, have we accepted it? That general other. That generalized other. What have they taught us about who we are? So you might look at this and start taking an evaluation and saying, what have I actually been taught that has constrained me? It may not be true. Maybe it was true when I was a child. But like the elephant who grows up and becomes much stronger and proves in other arenas that they can produce greater feats of strength have I constrained myself to believe I can't break that small rope that I haven't been able to break since I was a small young man. I'm sorry? Does it fall under being brainwashed? If we look at the idea of brainwashing, we look at the idea, now let me rephrase that. I don't look at brainwashing as necessarily a bad thing if you have control of what goes into your brain. The question is, are you letting other people wash or program your brain? Well, it's training, yeah. Absolutely, it's training. Let's look at page 5. We're going to talk a little bit about some theory, some psychological theory, about how we actually arrived at our definition of ourselves. The self is often conceptualized through a series of 4 different steps, or at least this is one psychological communicative theory that we go into. The first one is direct definition. We've already talked about that. The people that have been significant in our lives have actually defined us some way. And we've already talked into that a little bit about what our parents and what our friends and what our teachers may have told us about who we are and what we're able to do. The second, reflected appraisal. Our perception of another's view of us. Reflected appraisal. You know, it's one thing to actually become 17, 18, 19 years old, have parents and a family who has told us constantly, you're the responsible one. We're so happy because you're accountable for your actions. You get out and get an apartment and you get a job. And you're pretty happy about being responsible and actually doing all this on your own and proving that you can. And about a week, every month, before your bills are all due, your parents run around town and pay all your bills. Now some of us would go, woohoo! Right? Just be excited. And yet you've been told all up until this point, you're the responsible one, you're the accountable one, and you're good at this. Have they shown you that you're good at this? Of course not. By their actions, they're actually telling you, communicating to you, that you're not as responsible as their words say. Reflected appraisal. It might be something as simple, and it could be in contradiction, but it might be something as simple as being defined as, how do you see yourself reflected in the eyes and the behavior of the people around you? The other are identity scripts, rules for living an identity. You know, I happen to be a son, a brother, a teacher, a consultant, a customer. It's interesting that when I go fulfill or actually act within these various roles, we have scripts that go along with how we're supposed to behave and how we're supposed to act. And yet families are also raised within cultures with those kinds of scripts too. How many times are you told, this is a family that prays? This is a family that eats dinner together, or this is a family that keeps its word. We have these scripts, these dialogues that help us create, again, our self-definition and our self-concept. And it's interesting how sometimes people get so locked into those dialogues that when I go home, back to Chicago, to visit my parents, and I'm in that atmosphere. My brother, for example, is an emergency room nurse, and he's won awards in Chicago for dealing with various crises under pressure for emergencies and the like. And if I went home and somebody fell down in front of us and got hurt, and my brother was trying to kind of get in there to help, my mother would actually fend him off and tell him to go call 911. Because that's what she would tell her son, not the emergency room nurse. And so it's amazing how sometimes some of our self-concept and our definitions get categorized at the exclusion of others because of where we are. And then finally, attachment styles. Attachment styles is a psychological theory that suggests that based on the relationship you've had with your primary caregiver at the time that you were born and how you were treated at that time will actually suggest that this is how you look at people today as an adult. Now you can buy into this or not, but it's interesting to actually look at and say, is there a correlation? Can I actually fit myself into it? And does this affect how I see other people today and perhaps how I see myself? The first one being, for example, a secure relationship. If I had a secure relationship with my primary caregiver, meaning I was fed when I was, when it looked like I was going to get fed, I was changed when I needed to be changed, I was touched and held and cuddled and all these other things that would have produced a healthy relationship from the very start, today I probably have a pretty positive view of myself because I feel valued. And I probably have a pretty positive view of other people because I recognize their value and their contribution. Okay. The next one there, how about an anxious and ambivalent relationship? I like to look at this and say, well, sometimes I was fed, sometimes I wasn't. It was kind of, and when I wasn't fed, may have realized it was probably something that I did and I was being punished. Same thing with changing. And that may have actually pulled its way through to the time that I was a child, and sometimes my parents or my significant family members, whoever they may have been defined as and who they were, would show up at the ballet recital, the spelling bee, the Little League game. Sometimes they wouldn't, for the very same reasons. I interpreted that as, when that didn't happen, I was being punished. Obviously, I did something wrong. I was rewarded when they came. Well, if I look at that, we're suggesting that today we've got a positive view of others because we were rewarded or punished, and we were feeding on that reward or punishment. And I've got a pretty negative view of myself because I'm waiting for that approval from others. The third here, the dismissive. This is the relationship I like best to categorize by the time that the person was a child in grade school. Now, the attitude is obviously prominent, but I think the example makes better sense for quick understanding. By the time the child is in grade school, comes home with a report card, and there are A's all over that report card. Straight A's. Look, Mom, look, Dad, I got it. I got all A's in my report card. And the parent looks at the child and says, that's nice, dear, go play. Just kind of dismiss them off. Interesting to note, though, the same thing holds true when the child comes in and there might be all E's, all F's, all failures on the report card. D's, F's, D's and F's. Look, Mom, look, Dad, I didn't do so well on my report card. The response is the same. That's nice, dear. Go play. That raises usually an adult, at least according to this theory, who winds up with very positive views of themselves and negative views of others. Why? Because I begin to realize that anything that happens good in my life, who's responsible for it? Me. I didn't get a whole lot of help. I don't expect a whole lot of help. So anything that I accomplished, I did. And then finally, the fearful relationship. The child who was always fearful and as a result may have gotten beaten, may have been fed, may not have gotten fed, but it was always under the guise of fear, attentiveness, and tension. And the extreme, we're talking abuse. And as such, we're talking about people who wind up growing up as adults and having a relatively negative outlook about themselves and a negative outlook about others. Don't feel very valued and recognize that people are only out to hurt me. You add that to the other three, and we're suggesting that's where our self-definition and our self-concept has its basis. And we talked about this already. If you look at page 6, the idea that we are, and I like the word that was used earlier with respect to the elephants, we're brainwashed. Are we brainwashed by other people? Are we brainwashed by society? Are we trained? We can use the word brainwashed if we want to. We can use the word training. We can use the word cultural understanding. However we do it, I want you to take a moment and think about that programming concept. And for the moment, for the next half hour or so, I want you to think about your brain being a lot like a computer. If your brain is a computer, what's the programming? The language of the words that you're using to frame the thoughts. And for those of you that have been with me at any of my other presentations, you will know that one of the themes I keep coming back to is just this. The mind will process action far more quickly than it will process negation. The mind will process action far more quickly than it will process negation. And if I told you you can do anything you want in the next half hour, just don't think of an apple. Now, based on some of you smiling at me, you're also beginning to realize what I just said. The mind will process action. Think of an apple far more quickly than it will process negation. Don't. The mind is going to process the action. Now, I teach public speaking. I deal with an awful lot of students who have a very serious fear, anxiety over the idea of public speaking, to the point that it physically manifests itself in the real serious shakes, and it physically manifests itself in the sweating and the flush color, the blood rushing to the head. I've had people start panting, etc., etc. Well, think about what they said to themselves in preparation for this. The mind will process action far more quickly than it will process negation. And they've said to themselves in preparation for their speech hundreds of times, don't be nervous, don't be nervous, don't be nervous. What are they actually programming themselves to be? Be nervous. And all the physical manifestations of nervous will come to them far more quickly than their capacity to process the negation don't. So we need to ask ourselves, how have we been hardwired? Were you hardwired to be fearful of public speaking? Every time they do the survey, number one or number two. Public speaking always happens to be one of those, number one or number two, and people's greatest fears. You know what the other one is? Yes, dying. Now, mind you, those two don't have any connection, of course, unless you're asked to give your own eulogy. However, one of the things that we have to that we look at and pay attention to is how did we get there? Our program. Who did it? People who love us. What? People who love us. Think about that. My physical manifestation of presentation. I get up to give a speech at a class or in front of a club. And as I'm actually giving that presentation, I might be shaking a little bit. And as I'm shaking a little bit, most of my audience may not even notice this, but I notice. And this might make me a little bit off my game. But I have important things I need to share with people. And so I shake this paper. I finish my presentation. By all accounts, it went well. I sit down. The first thing I do is what? Run the whole thing back through my head. And every time I run it through my head, that gets a little bit more. That gets a little bit more. And I emphasize this part, right? So I'm not helping myself any, am I? And so the child who isn't really taught to be afraid of public speaking, and in fact, during their first presentation, which was probably show and tell, in the kindergarten, first or second grade, the teacher said, boys and girls, tomorrow I want you to bring your favorite toy or your favorite game or your favorite pastime, your sports equipment or whatever it might be. I want you to bring what your favorite item is at home, and I want you to bring it to class. You're going to get an opportunity to show the rest of the class and tell us about it. That's exciting. The child gets to go home, and that child gets to talk about to their parents or to the big brother, big sister, grandma, grandpa, whoever's at home, I get to go and take my favorite item to school and I get to share it and show it to everybody. This is exciting. Until the person who you're telling, who loves you dearly and poisons you right now, poisons you with that programming, is going to say, oh dear, let me tell you the story about the epileptic fit that I just had up in front of a class, up in front of my group. And next thing you know, they're telling this exaggerated story about how this little shaking turned into a violent shaking and lots of, fire and things going on over here and a tornado over there and the whole building was coming down around them. We just planted some really horrible thoughts in the name of love and entertainment into that child's head. That child may not have been nervous about the idea before, but is now. Therein lies the problem. And so we talk about programming, what we put into our brains and how we phrase what we put into our brains will have a direct result on our immune system, on our body, on our physical reactions, etc., etc. But it also has a direct result on what we do and how we act and how we behave. For those of you that have significant others that you've constantly sent to the store, do you realize that you get angry at them for doing something that you've told them to do? Huh? Look at this here. Get bread, milk, coffee, cheese, and don't forget the eggs. And what did they not come back with? And who are you yelling at? They come back with bread, milk, coffee, and cheese. They forgot the eggs because you actually told them, forget the eggs. The mind will process action far more quickly than it will process negation. And so don't forget the eggs. The mind is going to focus on forget the eggs. We'll dismiss it. And as a result, you're now yelling at your significant other for coming back and doing exactly what you've asked them to do. You just put them in a no-win situation. Congratulations. And you wonder why they're a little bit frustrated. So let's look at this. What communication have I been using with myself that has framed, or rather hardwired, my image and my personal climate? Social construction. How have I framed the world, and in what language have I used? How have I actually framed my own definition? And in what language, in what words? Exactly how do I phrase it? Because that phrasing has a very serious impact on how we think about it, what we think about ourselves, and as a consequence, how we behave. And as a consequence, what we're able to accomplish in our lives. Because if we begin to realize that things are not possible, they aren't. If we begin to frame things that things are indeed possible, you've got a whole different life ahead of you. And that's what's important. So then the next question, how do I change this pattern of behavior? How do I socially construct the change? Folks, that's on page 7. You can take this up, put it up, rip this out, and put it on the wall if you like, or put it on your desk. So let's talk about clear steps. Number 1, I will be aware and recognize my communication patterns. I will be aware and recognize my communication patterns. Sometimes it's interesting if we're walking down the hallway of a building or something and we catch ourselves going, oh, you idiot, I can't believe you did. We're talking to ourselves. What a horrible image some of us really have of ourselves. And so, be aware and recognize these patterns. Because the first step is acknowledgement. First step is awareness. Number 2, I will take control of my own mental programming through my self-talk and language choices. You have to commit. You have to decide. Here's the thing. The difference between you and a large circus elephant is that you can make the choice and decide to change. You can make the choice and decide to break those constraints. You can make that choice and you can decide. I will commit to positive change. Commit to it. Decide you're ready. If you don't decide you're ready, none of this makes any sense to you. If you don't decide that you're ready for change, none of this will make any sense. And that's okay, because what you've done is decided to do something else. And let's just recognize, in a socially constructed world, that's your decision. I will interrupt my negative patterns of communicative behavior. Interrupt your negative patterns. When you start walking down the hall of any of these buildings or anything else, and you start catching yourself beating yourself up, start catching yourself saying things about yourself to yourself that you're not happy with. Now, first, let me initially say that you'll probably get arrested if you practice primal scream therapy and raise your arms above your head and just start screaming. That's probably not the wisest choice. But you've got to stop and interrupt yourself. Interrupt those negative thoughts. Screaming is certainly one way of doing it. Except this is probably going to attract attention you don't want. But if I'm also looking at my brain as, at least for the moment, as a computer, and I'm looking at the programming aspect of things, what's to stop me from actually putting a stop button right behind my right ear, or your left ear if you're left-handed, right behind my right ear, and when I catch myself saying these things that I don't care to be saying, just hit the stop button. Just hit the stop button. Start calling yourself names that you don't like, just hit the stop button. An actual physical act that causes you to take a step back and pause and think. But here's the problem. If all I'm doing is stopping it for the moment, and we are creatures of habit, and I've stopped it and I've created a mental vacuum here at the moment, if all I do is keep walking down the hall, I'm likely to fall right back into my habitual patterns of thinking, and I'm going to fill it right back again without even realizing that I hit the stop button, I didn't hit the erase button, and it just started playing again. So here's where the next one comes in, number 5. I will change my self-talk to frame the person I know I can be, rather than the person others have chosen me to be. You've spent an awful lot of time in your life being told who you are and being identified by other people. Choose who you want to be now. And for some of you, recognizing that you have the choice is a huge step. A huge step. I will change my self-talk to frame the person I know I can be, rather than the person others have chosen me to be. How do I do that? Normally, you carry those self-affirmations around with you, written in your own hand, on a piece of paper, in your purse, your wallet, or your pocket. And every time you hit that stop button because you caught yourself actually formulating thoughts and saying things to yourself in your inner dialogue that you're not happy with, you hit the stop button, you immediately pull out that piece of paper, and you read the new programming that you'd like to replace it with 7, 8, 10 times. So you can start going over that again and again, then put it back and carry on your way. And let that new programming sit. Take control of your own program. Number 6, I will surround myself with positive people who affirm me and who are happy at my successful accomplishments. You know, you are actually a culmination of the top 5 people you hang around. Look at the personalities of the top 5 people you hang around. Are you happy with that? If you are, fantastic. If you're not happy with that, you might want to make some choices. Because what you constantly hear, you think about. What you constantly think about, you absorb. We go right back to this very first statement from Mahatma Gandhi at the very beginning. The top 5 people you hang around and spend all your time around. Think about it. Number 7, I will be a positive person who affirms others and am happy at their successful accomplishments. Wow, guess what? If I want to surround myself with those people, I better be one. It only makes sense. I will choose to watch positive programming on TV or other forms of selected media and read positive books. You know, we just talked about all this, looking at the various TV things and what sitcoms like the Drew Carey Show and the Roseanne Show, and these things can actually teach us. And sometimes these are not good things. And yet, people have a tendency to want to come to me the next morning after saying to me they didn't get an inkling of sleep because they were up watching this horror movie all night. And then they expect sympathy. Now that you've heard me, now that you know some of my thoughts on this, do you think I'm giving them any sympathy? You chose to watch that. Why? Okay. And number 9, I will seek out and emulate positive role models. Find the people that you want to be like who have actually accomplished some of the things that you see that you really want to accomplish. Seek them out, emulate them. And lastly, I will take note and congratulate myself daily on my own progress. I'm going to take note of this, and I'm going to celebrate the fact that I've accomplished something for a day. This is, sometimes you have to remember, however old you are, how many years you've been on this planet, that's as long as your programming up to this point has taken effect. Can you change your programming overnight like this? No. It takes at least 30 days to change a habit. And 30 days will get you really on track. But if you've got 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years of programming, don't expect to change overnight. But you got to make that first step. If you decided you're ready to do so. Page 8. Sample positive programming. Notice the emphasis on self and action. Here is a sample of what you might carry around with you in your pocket, your purse, your wallet. I am. I am. What a powerful statement to recognize the fact that you are valued and you are in existence at all. I am a good person. I have integrity. I do what is ethically right and good. Whatever life puts before me will be useful, a useful experience that will make me stronger, wiser, and more tolerant. I am strong enough to understand and make allowances for other people's weaknesses and their behavior towards me. Other people's behavior is about them, not me. I focus on the joy of living my life and helping others where and when I can. I am what I eat and drink, so I eat and drink good things. I am what I watch and play and listen. So I watch and play and listen to good positive things. I take exercise, which I enjoy. I walk when I don't need to drive or take the bus or train. I smile and laugh whenever I can. Life is good. Getting caught in the rain reminds me that it is good to be alive and feel it. I forgive other people. Deep down, everyone is a good person, just like me. I am a compassionate and loving, caring person. I am a good person. I am. When you start thinking about the affirmations you want to write for yourselves, be very careful how you word them, because if these become your programming as you've chosen them to, make sure they're worded exactly how you want to be. I don't think it goes without saying that your life depends on it and the quality of your life. So if you look, for example, at some other samples I've got on page 9, what might you write and carry with you? I really like my job, and I am good at what I do. I strive to do the best job possible in every aspect of my life. I look for areas where improvement is needed, and I improve them. I am a mentor for new employees, classmates, or persons new to my department. I gladly let people know how much I like and appreciate them. I am a good friend. I'm happy when I get home. Practice. Get comfortable with the ideas we've discussed. Don't apologize for taking control of your own positive personal climate and your own image. Because Power Images improvement is about recognizing what? Real battles won. Real issues confronted. This isn't easy stuff. Real courage. Real honesty. And real integrity. Not just some quick fix. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? No, don't eat it at all. That's often a teacher's question when they look at the overwhelming project. One bite at a time. One step at a time. Are there any questions we can help you with today? If there are no questions today, I'm going to say just last couple of words. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your attention. I appreciate your presence. Please fill out those evaluations because Student Support Services really wants them back. And you're welcome to take those workbooks with you and draw all over them as you like. Thank you.